G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Kelly, thanks so much for making the time to catch up. We were just chatting before about the prevalence of burnout, and that's obviously a space you're doing a lot of work in and are really familiar with. And, as we said, it's a really important topic for small business owners in particular, because for various reasons they can be arguably a little more susceptible to burnout than a lot of others in the population. But rather than me rabbit on, why don't I just pass it over to you for a minute to tell me a little bit about, I guess, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm really glad to be here today and have the opportunity. So for me, I've recently set up my business, Prospera Consulting, which sort of works across a number of areas, the main ones being leadership and executive coaching, but also doing some work in the burnout prevention space. That's really been fueled off my own personal experience with burnout and I guess a passion for wellbeing and health over a number of years. So at the end of last year, I sort of took a bit of a career break and reflected on what I sort of wanted to do with my career moving forward. And I know I'm doing a number of things with my career. So that's something that I was sort of, in terms of reframing my own career, looking at the things that I was passionate about, having variety and having flexibility, and just being able to manage my own work-life balance in a way that was going to be supportive of me and my own burnout journey, or hopefully never again a burnout journey moving forward.
No, that makes heaps of sense. So I guess, look, if we particularly focus in the burnout space, how would you describe the typical clients that you work with? And what is it that tends to trigger them to go, oh, I need to come and talk to Kelly?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting actually in sort of reflecting on the client base, because my business is relatively new, but I'm getting quite a number of clients come through from a coaching perspective, particularly. And some are coming, initially for the burnout coaching. Others are coming from a leadership and development perspective. The interesting thing that I'm finding is the ones that are coming from a leadership and development perspective generally have some sort of work-life balance challenge. So from my perspective, being able to traverse both areas, I think is really beneficial. It's not that with development ones that we focus specifically every session on burnout, but if you're looking to develop yourself and you're looking to lead more effectively, having a real handle on your work-life balance, your ability to recharge yourself and your ability to show up work at peak performance, it's extremely critical. And trying to sort of develop yourself and have that self-awareness when you're stuck in fight or flight, it's super challenging. You're not in that headspace to sort of be thinking about. You're in more of that reactive mode rather than that responding mode. So I find that for, growth and development, having that real handle on your work-life balance and your just your self-awareness and ability to manage your stress is it's critical for everyone. So I think it's great to have that skill.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense to look at burnout as part of your overall work capacity. And I suppose, look, one question that sort of sprung to mind when we use the term burnout, do you tend to look at it as a binary on or off thing? You're either burnt out or you're not, or does it tend to be a spectrum of, I'm a little bit burnt out to I'm a lot burnt out?
Yeah, look, I like to look at it as a spectrum, and there's a number of different spectrums out there, some more complicated than others. So there's the 5 stages of burnout or the 12 stages of burnout. The one that I actually like to use, it's a sort of a more probably less known one, but it's been developed by Nicholas Petrie from New Zealand, and he's done a lot of work in the burnout space recently. He looks at it in 3 stages. So when you think about burns, we're 1st degree burn, 2nd degree burn, or third degree burn. So first degree burn is just sort of that, I guess, initial stage when you've had a bit of a busy or stressful period at work, but you're continuing to work effectively, but it's sort of that first little warning stage. The second degree burn is a little bit when you've been more in that kind of chronic stress, and you've got that bit of feeling of fatigue, and maybe your motivation, your effectiveness is starting to dwindle a little bit. The third stage is that full-blown burnout when you're incapacitated by burnout. It's starting to affect your daily life. Your mental health and things like that are starting to be impacted as well, and you're just struggling to sort of function. It's almost at that stage the emotions sort of start to come into. It can be a little bit more unpredictable and harder to control. I just really like that one because it's quite simple. We've got 3 stages. We're not trying to look at 12. It gets really complicated when we're starting to look at 12. And all of those 3 stages allow us to work out really clearly what type of interventions might be required. So like from a first degree burnout, when we're just in that sort of initial stress phase, we're sort of more looking at that's probably where a short period of rest and recovery is going to impact us and be effective. Obviously, there's some lifestyle things we might need to look at. When we're getting to the second stage, that sort of more chronic stage, that's where we need to start looking at some of our behaviours and our mindset and changes to the way that we work. And by the time we're in third degree burn, we're sort of probably really needing to look a little bit deeper. So more at some of the deep life reflections and that real introspection around, am I playing a role in this myself? How much is work impacting me? What do I need to change to get myself sustainable, not only at work, but in life? And really reflecting deeply on that whole, often people in that third degree stage have been there before. It can be where we start to get that serial burnout occurring, and you sort of look at that definition of insanity. It's when we start to get that serial burnout happening. It's, I guess, being really aware that to come out of that permanently, we really need to do something differently. And it does take time to work through all of those things. And that's where I guess having a coach or someone to guide us through that and keep us accountable is really important, and to challenge us as well on, I guess, understanding what may be contributing to that. Because generally there is a personal component when we're in that serial burnout of really needing to understand how we can impact and change ourselves. Obviously also looking at the work environment as well. They generally go hand in hand.
And I guess that does lead me into my next question, and perhaps you've partly answered it, but I was interested to know, like, what sort of process do you take clients through? And I guess, it's probably different if they're coming to you for executive coaching versus burnout support, but there's some similarities, particularly from the burnout perspective, around how you work with clients and how do you step them through it?
Yeah, I guess it depends initially what they're coming for. So if it's a burnout client that's coming specifically for, and they're generally executives or leaders that I'm seeing that have got the burnout challenges anyway, just I guess really doing a period of discovery and understanding, what's been going on for them, what's happening, what's going on in their life. Often when someone's burnt out, it's not just a work thing. Often there's compounding factors of things happening at home or in personal life plus the work thing. It's generally just not one, in my experience, not one factor that will drive the burnout. It's often a perfect storm of multiple factors all coming together at once. So we'll sort of understand that and sort of, I guess, look at what's causing stress in life, what's draining energy in life. And interestingly, we often think that burnout comes from more often than not, it does come from things not going great in life, but it is actually possible for someone to burn out when they're really passionate about something and just don't know when to stop. So it's really understanding the drivers that sit there. Then I guess sometimes we'll run assessments. It may be a burnout assessment. It may be more of a behavioural type assessment to understand if there's some factors in the way that someone is operating that may be contributing to their burnout, and that gives us some data to then work with, and that also can help the coaching client, depending on what their personality and things like that, also get some self-awareness around some of that. So some data actually sitting there to work with is sometimes helpful.
Yeah, great.
We'll then sort of, I guess, look at, if someone's in acute burnout, the first probably month or so of coaching is really almost like a bit of an intervention, a life intervention in how can we take some of the stress away? How can we get you some support? And how can we make some small changes that are going to have reasonable amounts of impact to sort of get you up and running? So we'll look at things like, often I find that clients run their particularly a lot of people who burn out are high performers because they have that perfectionistic traits and things like that. So we're always looking in our work life at what's the maximum that I can do today. When you're in acute burnout or even that chronic, the stage 2 or the second degree, we almost need to come back to what's the minimum that I need to do today to get by. And that's not around that slacking off. It's just about giving yourself a bit of slack and some grace. Because we get in this, you can only run at 150% for so long. And that's sort of where we get ourselves into trouble. So sometimes it's almost that just little check-in and reflection of coming back to saying, actually, I'm struggling right now, and I just need to pull it back for a little bit. And it's not sustainable for anyone to run at even 100% full time. We need some peaks and troughs in our work routine. So it's just around having that reflection, and it's actually okay to not run at 100% sometimes, particularly when when we do need to recharge our batteries. And where can I seek some support from home, at work? Who's in my support network? So that's really important in that, if someone is really struggling. And, we ideally want to get to a point where people don't have to take time off work. Sometimes it is necessary, but what can we do and how can we try and work within the boundaries that we've currently got to work through that? And the other part of it is just starting to look at how do I bring some joy back into my life? When we're in that burnout state, we've generally lost joy. And that's part of the problem, right? We get to the point where we've sometimes lost perspective between work and ourselves, and we've almost molded those identities into one, and that's when we start to run ourselves into a little bit of trouble. So starting to think about, how can I create some space for myself, just for me? What do I enjoy outside of work, and how do I get some happiness? That there's stress chemicals and there's other chemicals. Those stress chemicals we call the CAN chemicals: cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And then we've got the dose chemicals, which are our good chemicals, like our happy chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and our endorphins. So we think about when we're in stress, we're getting a lot of CAN chemistry in our body, which isn't ideal, but we need to be looking for things that give us a bit of a daily dose. So it might be, I love listening to music, playing with my dogs, taking, a walk on the beach. How do we start to counteract some of that stress chemistry with that happy chemistry? So there's a whole bunch of things that we can do, but it's just really working through a logical plan and really starting to work through the underlying beliefs that are driving some of the burnout behaviours. So, if it was just as simple as telling everyone to set boundaries, no one would be burnt out, but it's often, why can't we set the boundaries? It is people pleasing, it's perfectionism, it's not putting ourselves first. And they're the things that we really need to start challenging and working through, and just being curious about as well.
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. And I know from a grow small business perspective, one of the core components of our initial modules is helping people think through their strategic plan and a financial model. But often what falls out of that is that it makes sense for people to actually do less rather than more, and focus on a few things that are really going to move the needle rather than trying to spread themselves too thin. And obviously with that also comes thinking around, organizational structure and who else can we get to support you within the business, and, external support. But I guess part of that is also that mindset around setting some personal boundaries that are sensible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched on I guess another point that I'm quite passionate about is, I like to call it sustainable strategy. So part of my business, I do have a consultancy arm, but like in business consultancy, but one of the things that I'm passionate about delivering out of that is that sustainable strategy piece. And I do some consulting in another life, but one thing that I'm talking to my clients about in that space is, we're really good at adding onto the plate and adding more stuff onto the strategy. So we talk about, we do strategy, we've got the start, stop, continue. Everyone's really good at the start. No one's good at the stop. Like if I run that in a workshop, people really struggle to find things to let go of. But we think about one of the biggest reasons strategy fails, and it's because we don't make space for the stuff that's important. We try to do everything, and we end up doing something really poorly. Whereas what's the classic? It's strategies about choice, but we seem to forget that. And so it's like, if we want to start doing these new things and we want to start running our business or add a new product in or whatever it might be, what are we going to deprioritize or just let go of for the time being to create the space for the important stuff to get done? And that's not only about making your business successful, it's also about not burning your team out. So we're suddenly adding all this extra stuff onto the plate of our team members. We're not going to get the performance because we're going to burn them out. And they're going to be overwhelmed, and they actually might not be happy, and they might leave. So it's actually around being really intentional about our strategies and about the resources we have to deliver. And sometimes we don't intentionally go down that road of adding more stuff on the plate. We just do it without thinking. So really just coming back to thinking about, okay, I'm going to deliver this strategy. I'm adding all this new stuff on. What's moving? If you're not adding new resources and you're expecting the team to do all the extra stuff, how we actually make space for that.
Good point.
Are you a small business owner? You know that getting recruitment right can make or break your team's success. Just one mishire can cost your business up to 27 times their salary. Finding and retaining top talent is a challenge, especially in today's competitive market. That's where our Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit comes in. Over 10 intensive days, our online course is designed specifically for small business owners like you. We'll walk you through the process of sourcing and securing A players for your team. Here's what you'll gain. Learn the proven strategies to pinpoint and attract the best talent in your industry. Access our comprehensive playbook filled with templates and tools tailored to fit your business needs, and apply the resources right away to enhance your recruitment process and streamline hiring. Invest in your business's success by helping your management team become effective recruiters. Supercharge your hiring process today with the Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit, available at growasmallbusiness.com.
And Kelly, I guess, are you able to sort of briefly share a bit of an example of either somebody you've worked with or a story that might sort of bring this to life a little bit?
Do you mean from a burnout perspective, or?
Yeah. In terms of, how do you? So I guess somebody who's sort of walked through to the other side and feeling a lot better these days.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share my own story, if you like.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Just because it's been, I've been quite open in sharing my journey, because it's probably not been ideal, to be frank. And I've learned a lot about myself over the last little bit. But so my burnout dates back to 2014 was the first time that I burnt out. And it was quite severe. I ended up actually having to take, I was living in Adelaide with my family at the time, and we'd moved over there for my ex-husband's work, and I didn't have any family support over there. We had two small children in primary school, and I was in quite a demanding job, but my husband was as well, and he was traveling a lot, so a lot of the responsibility for things sort of fell on me. And I was on quite a big project as well with my job, and working a lot of late nights and things, and just didn't have the balance right, and ended up on a couple of week-long adrenaline rushes in hospital from it was really severe adrenal burnout, actually, and quite scary. I ended up having to have pretty much 18 months off work. So that's, you think, well, why did you burn out again? Interesting reflection. I was quite good in my work-life balance for a period of time. And the funny thing with burnout is that it sneaks up on you. Like, often you don't even know you're in it until you're really deeply in it. And so I had another couple of, nothing ever as severe as that again, but a couple of other patches in my work life after I moved back to Tassie, where I got myself in a bit of a burnout trap again. And generally it's been when I've been working on really exciting projects. So I talk about burning out because you're too passionate about things. For me, one of the challenges that I have to watch myself on is getting too passionate and wanting to overachieve, I suppose, and over investing in things and not knowing when enough's enough. So it's been a really big reflection of myself. And then, so I burnt out again towards the end of last year. And that was when I took my career break and realised that, funnily enough, in my burnout journey, I'd always thought it was the job. It's just the job's too stressful. And then you get to a third time burning out on a different 3 different jobs, and you start to look in the mirror a little bit, you just by absolute necessity, and think, well, what part am I playing in this? There is a common denominator here, and not to say the jobs weren't stressful, because they absolutely were, but in my experience personally, there's probably been a dual component to the burnout. Sometimes it has been, yes, the work has been really probably demanding, but also it's been my probably inability to put effective boundaries in place and disconnect myself from work in such a way that allowed me to recharge and switch off. Historically, I've had some challenges with the ability to switch off, because I like to think I'm a bit of a thinker, and so that sort of has, when I took that 4 months off work at the end of last year and start of this year, I really reflected on my life and the way that I was operating. And I'm not saying you have to take 4 months off when you burn out to reflect on life. That you absolutely don't need to do that. I was fortunate enough to get a redundancy from my role, and so that allowed me the time and space to do that. And I wanted to reflect on what was next, but you're really just looking within and starting to challenge some of those belief systems. So, perfectionism's been a big thing for me. So starting to actually look at that and just dig into what was driving that for me. And one of the big things that I've also sort of learnt was that was also triggering my inability to put boundaries in place. So I'm much better at putting boundaries in place now. Working on multiple things that I work on now. It's been really important for me to not overcommit myself, and so know when to say no and when enough's enough, and know when to stop at the end of the day, and being really deliberate in my end of day work routine, particularly when I'm working from home. I work mostly remotely. That can really blur the boundaries between work and home. So for me, it's been able to have a bit of a routine at the end of the day, so I can almost emotionally, or whatever you want to call it, just have a shift from work to home. So it might be, depending on the day, what I do, it's sometimes just changing my clothes. I change out of the work clothes into the home clothes, put my slippers on, whatever it might be, but to signal that that's the end of the day. The computer's shut. I don't have emails on my phone, work emails on my phone, because I find it again starts to blur those boundaries. Having a really clear phone strategy is important. That's still a work in progress for me, but that's my one thing I'm really working on, is being able to disconnect from the phone, because often that puts us in work mode. But the other things is just, being aware of your warning signs. So I sort of know, for me, after a lot of reflection, when I'm starting to, what my signs are when I'm starting to feel stressed. So that can be a range of things. It can be, maybe self-doubt creeps in, or what are our little, when we're not feeling sort of, I guess, that sense of safety from just the stress building up, does my mind start to race a little bit? And then when I feel those now, I kind of know that it's time to put those interventions in place, and that I'm quite managing my self-care in the way that I should. Once upon a time, I didn't have that awareness, and I'd probably just continue to spiral down a path of burnout without putting that, being able to intervene really quickly, and knowing that the interventions don't have to be massive things. Sometimes it's just a little bit of deep breathing, or walk around the block to just reset the mind, or whatever it might be. But it's just starting to work through that. But yeah, a big amount of reflection and some just intentionality in how we work and how we carry out our work day, so that we kind of know what's effective and where to draw a line.
Yeah, you covered a lot there. And look, conscious we don't have long left, but I guess are there a couple of key points you would recommend, particularly for small business owners, around this burnout issue?
Yeah, well, actually, we often sort of think, entrepreneurs and small business owners are at super high risk of burnout, and that's for a number of reasons, largely because, again, people are generally really passionate about their businesses. They're often also under a lot of pressure, particularly in the early stages of trying to make ends meet and get things happening. Probably the first point that I often say to people is, know your why and your values. So why have you gone into business? And often people have gone out of full-time employment into business for better work-life balance. It might be that they want more flexibility or to spend more time with their family. Maybe they want to earn a bigger financial reward. But I think that's a really important checkpoint, because sometimes we get stuck so much in the doing and the delivering the business that we lose sight of the why we started it in the first place. And if we have started it for more flexibility or better work-life balance, but we find ourselves working 7 days a week because we're trying to get everything established and set up, it's a really good checkpoint back to see what that you're not actually living in alignment with why you started that process. So I think that's just an easy reflection point and just a good anchor point to check back in with us, I guess, periodically.
Yeah.
Probably the other one is when you're starting up a business or an entrepreneur, like nothing's ever done. You can be going on forever. There's always something more to be done. So
there's no finish line.
There's no finish line. So I think getting clear on a couple of things. One is getting comfortable that things aren't done and how much is enough. So being really intentional around what are my goals for this week, checking in, how much am I working? Am I working 7 days a week, even if it's not full time? Is that how I want to set up my work-life balance? Because, if you're working every day, you really don't get a day where you're completely switched off and you're recharging mentally. Because you're always on. So that can really become troublesome after some time as well. And I think the other thing to think about, and you sort of semi-touched on it before when we talked about strategy, was if it's your intention to scale your business, really thinking, I guess, even though you may not want to scale it from day one, starting to think about the way that you're setting your business up to scale. And because a lot of the time we set up these businesses, particularly services-based businesses as well, and everything requires our time 100% in order to deliver. If it's your intention to scale, just starting to think that through from the start in how you're setting things up. So how can you set things up that take less time, or is there a system you can use that might require less of your administrative time and then shortcut that a little bit? But if we sort of want to scale something, but it's requiring us to work, be 100% of the only person contributing to that, we're potentially setting ourselves up for burnout down the track. So just starting to be intentional with that. And just, again, it's just making space in your calendar for your personal things that make you happy. You might be going to the gym, time with the family, whatever it is that recharges you, just making sure we're popping that in the diary.
Yeah, great point. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for your time. We've got heaps to take away from that. We'll put some of your contact details in the show notes, and look, it'd be great to continue this conversation on another podcast at some point.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks very much for having me.
Excellent. Thanks.
Want to help other small business owners improve their business? There's one quick thing you can do, which is jump over to iTunes and leave a review. Or if you don't have an account, follow us on Spotify.